Hi, everybody, and welcome to Friday, Live at 5. For the next few weeks, for the next 5 weeks after this, I'm going to be doing it on Fridays because I am teaching an introductory class in Dubuque with a group that did a fabulous job on this subject of a trout, a rainbow trout. And I picked this seemingly oddball subject because it kind of introduces you to basically all the moves that you would make in the course of painting a watercolor. And I, of course, told them about the basic premise of watercolor, which is the result that you get is going to be your knowing what happens when you apply a particular consistency of paint to a particular condition of the paper. And I explained the three paper conditions, which are dry, water on top of the paper or starting to soak in with some on top, and water soaked beneath the paper's surface with the pigment still on top but not yet dry. So those three conditions. And then the two consistencies of paint are runny, a lot of water, less paint, or slow moving or not moving, more paint and less water. Hi, Carol. Yeah, we're also going to have a little cooking segment too. It's the feast day of St. Joseph, and we're going to make pasta San Giuseppe. So what I did to get these folks used to the idea of these different consistencies, I had them make a small runny mix of yellow ochre. Let's make it runny and get it there. When you tip the palette, it runs. And I had them do a little swatch up there. Then I had them mix a slower moving version of it and had them make a swatch of that. So then I had them take a smaller brush. This is really fun because you can basically do this with two brushes, a mop and a number 10-ish round. This is still water on the surface there. I'm going to get some burnt sienna runny mix. And if you put it into a runny, it sort of disappears. Very much disappears there. But you get a subtle line. So I told them that this is kind of like I use the whipped cream on hot cocoa analogy, or milk or whipped cream on hot cocoa, but you can also use the analogy of milk into coffee or foamed milk into coffee. So let's use some slow-moving mix and a runny mix of ultramarine blue so we can see that a little bit better. Runny, disappears, and spreads out. While at the brush, how about a slow-moving mix? That stays. The edges soften, but it's more or less distinct. So what we were going to do was put these colors down for the rainbow trout and use these different consistencies of paint to get these soft dots on the rainbow trout. So I'm going to do the draw on this, which is a pretty simple draw. I had them divide the paper like that so they could do it this way. It's a kind of pair of parentheses. on its side. Tapering a bit. The tail, of course, the front is sort of blunt. You could think of this as sort of a triangular or a Y. If you think in terms of the center line of this, of the fish, then that dorsal fin is pretty much a little behind that area. And it's sort of a, well, if you just look at it, it's like a Dorito chip or a pair of parallel lines like that. Then we've got a fin that is near here. It's not centered. It's like a little sausage shape or something. There's a, if you sight down this line, you can see about where that one comes. Okay. And it too is like a kind of a triangle with a notch cut out. Then just below this, slightly behind it, we've got a small triangle. I don't know what they call them. Or you can make like an M. And another triangle here. It's like a right triangle. And it's, I would say, between the center points here, it's just a little bit forward of center. And that helps us find where the gill is, which is like another parenthetic line. And then the mouth, very important on the mouth. Don't put it halfway. Put it a little below halfway and slant it down. And then the eye, right where the corner of the mouth is, the eye is above that. We'll make it a circle for now. So, hi, Becky. That's about all the drawing you need to do. So how we're going to execute this is we're going to put a runny mix of burnt sienna into the fins. Then we're going to pull a line of yellow ochre across the top, runny yellow ochre across the top of the fish, a line of very runny alizarin crimson through the center of the fish, and then below that, perhaps skip a little bit of a white line there, we're going to put a line of ultramarine blue. So we're going to mix those puddles up ahead of time. Hi, Michael. I'm going to mix up the pale blue, runny mix of it. I'm going to see if I can pull this into your view a little better. There we go. That's more like it. So there's our runny mix of blue. Our runny mix of yellow ochre. Now my board is at about a 45-degree angle. I had them working more to 15. A little shallower angle. It's generally a little easier to execute. As long as you've got some angle to the board, the water can run downhill. So this is I'm going to be reintroducing, recovering, covering again the basics of watercolor. So, runny mixes, burnt sienna, ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, and yellow ochre. I guess I had one already, didn't I? Oh well. Okay, I'm going to start with the fin. Now you could do this very little bit, a little runnier on the tail. Maybe a little bit there. Okay, first puddle. Oh, I got it in the way, I'm sorry. Swap, paint over the eyes, paint over everything else, yellow ochre. And let them merge. Let the colors above merge, the burnt sienna merge with the yellow ochre. Rinsing that good, I'm going to get the runny alizarin crimson, come right underneath that. One of the participants did something really interesting. Being a beginner, he's not used to the strength of alizarin crimson, and mixed it a little hard, or mixed it a little strong, and he turned it into a coho salmon, and it looked like a coho salmon. It was really neat. Now, leaving a little bit of a light line underneath, I'm coming with the blue. Maybe I'll lighten that up a bit. So we got kind of a rainbow effect, and I guess that's why they call it a rainbow trout. Now, while we've been doing this, let's see, I'm going to pull that right down into there. While there's water on the surface of the paper, you can manipulate the paint. When it's starting to soak in a lot and there's just loose pigment on top, that can create problems. You can put thicker paint on. So at this point, I'm going to mix a stiff mix of the ultramarine blue and the burnt sienna to make a kind of darkish, well, we could even use the Prussian to get a kind of a greenish blue. And then I'm going to pull it along the top. And maybe I will take a damp brush and come right underneath that with some yellow ochre, just touching it. Rinse the brush, squeeze it out, and basically just use water to move some of that around. Maybe even put a bit more here, bit more here, bit more there, bit more there. Okay, now let's get that smaller brush. And get a stiff mix of a blue. In other words, slow moving. Either blue will do. Very top. And I'm also going to put little dits and dots. Now that's really melting in because it's very wet. So I'm going to wait a second on that. I could take this and maybe get some of that slow-moving brown and now what if that looks too? Quickly rinse the brush. Taper it out. Get some modeling in there. Slow moving paint into runny paint. I'm going to take this brush and I'm going to, it's got the mixture of the blue and the brown. You could either apply these dots, these speckles on these trout, with the point of the brush naturally, or you could do this where they'll melt in, or you could do a combination of the two. And then I'm going to smear the ones down here so that they don't look too irregular. So let's do a few that are deliberate marks, lines in the fin, line in the gill. The dots in the fins tend to follow the spines in the fin. So these are very thick, stiff paint that I'm putting into a very damp. I could darken the eye and leave a bit of a highlight. I could put a line on the mouth. So the idea here is that if you put stiffer paint into the wet surface, the edge melts and it stays pretty much where you put it. If you put runny paint in, it'll just disappear. So it's a little drier up top. I'm going to be putting some more dots. So just monitoring the paper condition and putting in a consistency of paint that's appropriate for what I want the mark to look like. So a few more marks down here, dots, and I'm sure that if you fished and caught some rainbow trout, no two that you pull out are going to look the same, or they shouldn't. If they are, it's a reason to get suspicious. So this we're going to let dry a bit. And I am going to check my water, boiling water. Very important that we have boiling water for the pasta. So this is the point where I want to come in with very stiff, very slow-moving paint. And for dark marks, that's usually going to be a mixture of the burnt sienna and the ultramarine blue. Okay. Well, before I do that, let's have some fun. While I'm waiting for this to dry, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, for the benefit of one of the students who cannot come for the Tuesday session, I'm going to demonstrate the technique that I was planning to teach them that Tuesday, so she can practice it at home. And then I will be posting for them the and sending her the image. So, Janet, we're going to learn something that's called a beaded wash. And you guys who've tuned in before all know what this looks like. But a beaded wash is how we get the appearance. Let's see, let's maybe do it. Yeah, you take a runny mix of paint. Has to be runny. I'm going to use ultramarine blue in this instance. Maybe I'll put a little bit of alizarin crimson in it to make it a nice visual purple. There's something in your eye called visual purple. I'm not sure what it is. So you get a good, big, runny puddle. Lots of paint. The big mistake is to mix too little paint. And you load the brush fully. And you load the brush by laying it in sideways. Don't load it like this because you'll only load the tip. Gravity is pulling paint out. You need to load it on the side. Then you draw a mark and you wait for this bead to form. And you come up, you don't smear it across, you come up underneath it and catch it and walk it down. Now let's say you want to skip around something. You can do that. Keep a bead, don't starve the bead out. Come up underneath, catch it. If the paint is loaded and these brushes carry a good load, you can sometimes get two. But if you see the beads start to starve out, that's when you reload. Come up underneath, catch it, and let the gravity pull the paint down. We are not smearing the paint to get a smooth application of purple. We are letting the gravity and the water do that. So let's say that the bead will wait for you when you want to do something. Let's say we want to go to a red or violet. I'm going to put some red in there now. You can change, again, a runny mix of paint. You might do this for something like a sunset, where you change the color as you go, or any number of things. Now along this edge I could do that, straighten that up. That's called the beaded wash, and we're going to do a scene that's ocean and sky and a boat, I'm pretty sure. I haven't landed on quite the exact one I want to do. But the two things about this, it always has to be a runny mix of paint, and it has to be mixed up with lots to spare. So now that bead at the bottom, when it gets to the bottom, and you have to have the paper on an angle, your board on an angle. So you can also do it with other colors. Let's make this color something weird. Brownish. Let's say you had a complicated shape that you needed to paint around. Like a house with a chimney or something. You could start out. And the bead, oh, see, I'm starving the bead there, so I want to quickly reload. And if you're going across and you see the bead starting to starve, stop right there, reload the brush, do it again. Keep a bead. Don't let it get away from you. Can do it vertically as long as you keep a bead at the bottom of the mark you're making. So that's the general idea there. Okay, so back to our fish. We should be dry enough now to do these final marks. Smaller brush, stiffer paint. That's what I was mixing here. These are the marks that really make the thing come to life. So the eye, I'm going to perhaps a thinner, browner line for the gill openings. I'm going to soften the top edge. Now, there is a kind of, oops, I got too much paint there. There is a socket to it that the eye is in. While I'm waiting for that to dry, I'm going to put a few more of these. Dark dots in. Let's see if I can get that. Yeah. Okay. And maybe a few more. They do seem to follow a bit of a line. Now I'm going to just do a couple short glazes and that'll be it. You could paint a kind of an interesting background in there if you wanted. Maybe a little bit of a burnt sienna yellow ochre glaze on that fin. I think I'd like a kind of a pink glaze. On that part of the tail. Maybe just strengthen that. Through the center there. And perhaps a bit of a darker glaze here, and perhaps a bit of a darker glaze up there, and maybe even along here. Okay, so that's the idea. Runny paint, slow moving paint. If there's water on, if you put either one of those on a dry surface, it'll look exactly like what you put on there. If the surface then has paint on it and you bring runny paint to a wet surface, it's going to diffuse or bleed out. If you bring stiffer paint, slow moving paint to that runny surface, it won't spread out as much. You might leave the mark a little more specifically. Just try to avoid the thing that most people do, I think, that creates problems is putting too much runny paint into a wet surface. So I'm just throwing a few more spots on there just for fun. All right, so that's the painting section. the beaded wash, just remember to mix up a big runny puddle. Hi, Judy. Load the brush from the side, not the tip, so that you get the brush fully loaded. Draw across. Notice when I did that, I wasn't doing it like a pencil. Like this. I was doing it, laying the brush on its side so that the bead could come out. And then I pick the bead up from underneath, catch it, start to starve it, reload, come up from underneath, catch it, walk it down, and so on. So hopefully, Janet, that will give you an idea of what we're going to do. I'm going to email you the subject so that you can have a look at that. Now, off to the kitchen. I'll have to get the phone out. Here we go. And I'm going to have to set you up so that you can see what the heck is being done. Hopefully that will work. So, Shorty, you don't get up here. I'm going to bring my water to a solid boil. Salt it. And now I'm going to introduce the ingredients. So we have, for pasta San Giuseppe, the ingredients are pasta. I'm using tagliatelle. That's not the traditional one, but I'll explain the traditional one and why. Breadcrumbs, anchovies. I know most Midwesterners, hi Eileen, are allergic to anchovies. They're delicious though. Parsley, coarsely chopped. Olive oil. Black pepper. I'm going to put a little bit of lemon zest on it. A little bit of garlic. That garlic isn't traditional. Parmigiano Reggiano. That's going to be important. So the first thing we do, we get our pasta in there. Get that moving around. Always salt your water and always use lots of water. Next, I'm going to heat the pan. And put in some olive oil. So St. Joseph was a carpenter. And on the feast day of St. Joseph, they try to do something that is, the ingredients in the dish are symbolic. So the pasta typically would have been a pasta called mafaldine, which looks like it's flat and long and has a wavy edge like a lasagna noodle, but it's only about 3/4 of an inch wide. And it's supposed to look like wood shavings, like a carpenter would do with his plane. The breadcrumbs, which we're going to toast, are supposed to be symbolic of sawdust that a carpenter would use or produce. And the anchovies, I guess, of course, the obvious association of fish with Christianity. And now I'm going to toast these breadcrumbs. And we don't want to burn them or brown them, and I'm going to reserve a few. We just want to get them sort of golden. And this is classic cucina povera, poverty cuisine. Italians are just genius at cooking with small amounts of something and very simple ingredients, and making something wonderful out of it. So this would be kind of a primo that you'd have an antipasto, and then you'd serve this, and then you'd have some kind of meat course, which I guess typically being Friday or during Lent, which when this feast day occurs, they would probably have fish of some sort. So I'm going to turn that up just a bit. Just want to absorb the oil and make the crumbs golden brown. Okay. Now, going to put them on a plate, and they're going to get used later. This is going to be hard here. Let's see. I'm going to put this back and try to work at a distance here. Sort of difficult to hold a phone. I don't have a camera person going here. So the breadcrumbs go on the plate. Pan goes back on. Low heat. More olive oil. Wait to see that shimmer. When it starts to shimmer, it's about the temperature. Then in go the anchovies. And we want to sort of melt them down. They're going to disappear into the dish. I like a lot of anchovies. Good. Okay, now I want to take it down a bit. Now, traditionally, you wouldn't put much garlic in this, or maybe any. But I like garlic too. I'm putting the garlic in now so that it doesn't burn. If I'd have put it in earlier, it might have burned. Now I'm going to put this on warm. And I'm going to check my pasta. Al dente. Okay. I'm going to get a mug of pasta water to keep on the side. And that goes right in. Yeah, okay. Bring the heat back up. Now, traditionally, the breadcrumbs would have been put in with a little bit of the pasta water. I'll put some in to get it creamy. And it would have made it like a breadcrumb crema. But I like to do it with the breadcrumbs kind of dry on the top. It's a very quick dish. So, we're going to plate it up. Toasted breadcrumb. It's sort of the poor man's Parmigiana, we call it. But I am also going to put some Parmigiana Reggiano on it. And just to sex it up a bit, I'm going to put a little bit of lemon zest. So this isn't very Lenty when you jazz it up like that. And a little bit of chopped parsley. And happy San Giuseppe. So that's the cooking segment. I'm going to sign off and hope you guys enjoyed that. I'll be back next week with another project and maybe another cooking thing. Bye-bye.